This week on Capitol Report, Connecticut Republicans are again waving the warning flag over election security.
The fact is that people in the state are not confident in our election process.
Plus, a look at the downgraded ratings for Eversource.
They never miss an opportunity in Connecticut to blame the regulators for all their woes.
A look at the work being done to rehab brownfields and blight in Connecticut.
We will continue to transform houses, transform blocks, transform neighborhoods together.
Plus, a preview of what's to come this week at the state capitol.
There will be a special session to take care of some of the unfinished business from the regular session.
And how does Connecticut stack up when it comes to the nation's best license plates? Get it in gear. Capitol Report starts now. Welcome to Capitol Report. I am Tom Dutchik. We are so glad you're spending part of this Sunday morning alongside the great power panel, the great Brandon McGee, who I noticed that you're not on the list of notable alumni of Alabama State University, along with 2 Chainz. 2 Chainz got on there.
Oh.
How about that?
How about I was before him?
Okay,
so.
there you go. Okay.
Seniority.
Former Speaker of the House.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Great to be here.
And Liz Kranowitz saddened this week to learn that you were too old to date Bill Belichick this week.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Liz.
I think Leo DiCaprio, too. I'm out.
Senator McKinney, Yale, you're on no list of notable people there either.
Never will be.
All right, guys. So let's get on to it. Say it's now officially summer. Normally, this is quiet time at the state capitol, but with an election a little more than 4.5 months away, lawmakers are making a ruckus over election security. Recent arrests in yet another Bridgeport ballot fraud case had Senate and House Republicans getting the gang together to raise their concerns about election security reform. They say Connecticut's a national embarrassment and that the Democrats, well, they need to get on board and listen to their proposals concerning absentee ballots and, of course, drop boxes. Watch this.
We're talking about an election problem that is visible, that all of you know about, that the people of Connecticut know about, and we're trying to solve it. They're ignoring the problem. And we're going to keep having press conferences, and we're going to keep raising this issue until it's addressed, until every person in the state of Connecticut knows that this is important and that we have to do something.
Any vote, anything that has to do with elections, absolutely should be bipartisan. It is a very important issue. We must maintain the integrity of our elections. And there's no reason why we can't sit with the other side of the aisle and have common ground on what election reform should look like.
As for a response to the Republicans on election security, we asked the Nedster about this. Take a listen. Watch this.
The most important thing they did was hold people accountable on a timely basis. SEC now has 90 days to make a referral if they think there's any misdoings when it comes to election. We'll be able to bring charges on a much more timely basis.
All right, Liz, tee off on this one.
With all due respect to the governor, the point is not to speed up the process. The point is to deter people from taking these actions. And nothing was done in the session that would actually deter people from doing these things. And, you know, with all due respect, the drop boxes have cameras on them in so many of our towns because they're right by town hall. So everybody already knows that there's a video camera on them, and they did it anyway. And so, you know, this is a much more pervasive issue. We're heading into the first time we're going to be using early voting. The software on that is not up to date. The communication systems there aren't talking to each other. We were supposed to get new voting machines. That hasn't happened yet. I'm sorry, but the Secretary of State has failed at every single turn here to actually instill any semblance of confidence in our elections.
How about that, McGee? Huh?
Well, you know, I am a firm believer that we should address the concerns within our electoral process and the system. I don't believe that this is the first time we've ever tried out early voting. If we remember during the pandemic, we had to introduce some things that weren't normal here in the state of Connecticut. Do we have work to do? Absolutely. And I support the idea of working together. I think the Republicans have gotten that right. But I think, to Stephanie's credit, she's doing an outstanding job. But we have to continue to work with her.
Yeah, here's the one thing I think Republicans and Democrats agree on, is that in-person voting is safer than absentee ballot voting, right? And we've seen in Bridgeport that does undermine our whole absentee ballot system. Drop boxes were a creation of the pandemic. We don't need them now that the pandemic largely is over, although the virus is still with us, and we have in-person voting. We should get rid of the drop boxes. The governor makes a good point that if people are finally sent to jail for abusing the system and stealing votes, that maybe less people will be willing to do it, because clearly the people in Bridgeport just always do it. But we need to do more, and I think we start by getting rid of the drop boxes.
I think the one problem I have is that we're talking about Connecticut as a whole all the time when we talk about this is one town with bad actors. Yeah, there may be other things out there, but typically they're caught. They're caught by the registrars. Bridgeport is a separate and distinct issue. I think it's striking the balance between security and access to the ballot to make sure what we cast our ballots, it's who we vote for, and it's a secure process. And the governor's come a long way on this, and he's really pushing.
The access point.
I agree with that. But my only thing is, yeah, sure, we're looking at this as it's happening in Bridgeport, but you also have to remember the chilling effect this has on people's behaviors when it comes to turning out to vote, and the feeling that we don't have integrity in our elections, and the fact that we're going to early voting and we have a computer software system that's not going to alert registrars that somebody's already voted.
Tom Foley might argue that what happens in Bridgeport affects the entire state.
6,000 votes. I mean, come on.
All right, guys, so hey, last week the credit ratings agency Moody's downgraded Eversource's subsidiary Connecticut Light and Power, CL&P to McKinney, to a negative outlook. Moody's citing a challenging regulatory environment here in Connecticut and a deteriorating financial performance. Here's what the folks at Eversource had to say about the downgrade. Borrowing for infrastructure investments will be more expensive for us and ultimately for the customers as a result of these credit actions. The reason cited by Moody's for the heightened risks is the deterioration of predictability in the Connecticut regulatory environment. We continue to advocate for predictable policies which provide certainty for customers as we maintain safe and reliable service for residents and businesses in our service territory. Capitol Report decided to get some insight from State Senator Norm Needleman, one of Eversource's harshest critics when it comes to regulatory matters. Here's a little bit of what he had to say concerning the downgrade. Watch this.
They have continued on the path of not hiring enough people and relying more on contractors. And at the core, I think that strategy will not serve them when there are storms. And by taking this attitude that we're just not going to spend any more money in Connecticut because we don't know if we're going to get it back is ludicrous, in my opinion. It's an abrogation of their responsibility as a monopoly regulated utility.
Well, Liz and Johnny Mac differ on this one, so who wants at it first?
Well, listen, I mean, when you talk about investments that they're making in infrastructure, look at Massachusetts, where they've put $5 billion into infrastructure improvements. This is not a company that's saying that they don't want to improve their infrastructure. You know, unfortunately, Governor Lamont has decided to put himself right in the middle of the regulatory policies here. He has failed for years now to appoint enough commissioners on the PURA Commission to actually implement policies and represent the residents of Connecticut. And because of the fact that he's taken this so in-house in his administration and behind closed doors, I'll add, there is absolutely no transparency, and he owns the outcome. The regulatory policies are responsible for the downgrade and the rate hikes. I mean, this is squarely on his shoulders.
And McGee, this also affects housing too, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about housing, right, you think about the investments that the company will potentially make and continue to make, somewhere around $1.6 billion of investment here in the state of Connecticut. But talk about quality in the air and the investment in thermal. I'm not a
the geothermal guy, geothermal.
That part and the impacts it'll have on people in distressed communities is worth the conversation, if you will.
Yeah, listen, Norm Needleman is right. Every time something goes wrong, Eversource just blames the state of Connecticut. Liz, I respectfully disagree with you. Governor Lamont made a major change by putting Marissa Gillette in charge of PURA. I think she's doing a terrific job. We've always had 3 people, whether it's 3 or 5, doesn't matter. And you know, Eversource's statement is very telling. Well, the downgrade is going to cost us more, which means it's going to cost our customers more. That's right. It's not going to cost them in their millions and millions of dollars of bonuses because every time they do something, they turn around and screw the ratepayer, Joe.
But
That's
John,
what they do.
In all fairness, the policymakers at the state capitol have to realize that their actions have results. It's the storm response. They tell them they have to respond. Everybody has to be up and running. They're never going to be able to hire enough people. They have to have those contractors. We need to be fair about this. I think Governor Lamont is in a unique position right now, simply with everything, to be a leader on this. Convene both sides, really sit at the table, come up with it. Deregulation happened a long time ago. That's the original sin. Now, how do we fix it?
Well, McGee's nodding to that one. So earlier this month, Governor Lamont announced state grants to remediate 22 blighted properties, plans to put them back into productive use and grow more jobs and, of course, grow more housing. The state's brownfield remediation and redevelopment program is leveraging both public and private investments to clean up these properties statewide. And as Governor Lamont stated so eloquently, bringing these lifeless properties back from the dead. Not just brownfield seeing new life. Hartford Land Trust cut some new ribbons on newly renovated multifamily homes that sat vacant for decades. Watch this.
And this house here behind us, which will soon have new tenants, which will soon stand as a redeveloped beacon of what is possible when it comes to housing in the city and when it comes to housing in North Hartford, it's a seed of hope.
So despite having McGee here, you're nudging me during the clip saying, let me have some of this.
Well, look, because I've just seen what it's done for our state. You look at the towns of Waterbury, New Britain, all the way down through the valley. We have these prime pieces of property, old factories that can be turned into housing, can be turned into economic development sites. This is the only way it's going to happen. It's too expensive for any one developer to do.
Right, the rest is yours.
I appreciate the speaker, and if you remember, during your time, we invested about $5 million bipartisan support around creating the Hartford Land Bank. Yeah. And you talk about DECD, DOH, working together to remediate all of these distressed areas and creating housing for all. $26.3 million in grants to all of these various towns throughout the state is remarkable. And I'm looking forward to the continued support from the legislature.
All right, guys. Hey, so if any legislators were planning on taking a vacation this week, cancel your plans. The governor has summoned the General Assembly back to order for a special session. We'll discuss that and more with News 8's political contributor, my pal Mike Cerulli. When we get back. Do not go away. That's a smart panel. I can't even read the prompter. State lawmakers are expected to be called back in for a special session at the state capitol next week. Which on the agenda, here's Governor Ned Lamont to spell it out. Watch this.
They got to fix something regarding the car tax. They have to fix something regarding the bank charter. They want to fix something in terms of contracting for the schools, make sure it's really transparent, no possibility of self-dealing there. We'll see if the leaders want to add anything else onto the agenda. I think right now that's it.
Well, joining us this morning to explain more about the why these issues will take center stage is News 8's political contributor, my pal Mike Cerulli. Hey, Mike, what's going on with the agenda here?
Yeah, hey, Tom. This special session is shaping up to be one largely of technical fixes and tweaks. Of course, anytime a special session is floated, there's a rush to get this bill or that bill on the agenda. But what leadership and the governor have landed on is an agenda that starts, as the governor said, with fixing the tax on commercial vehicles first to avert a large increase on vehicles, mainly in larger cities. That's seen as a must-do. Some minor revisions to those state banking regulations and a tweak related to a COVID-era tax credit are also on the agenda. And one more notable item for this special session is a change to the charter of the South Central Connecticut Regional Water Authority. That's a mouthful. They just go by RWA. It would allow them to bid to acquire Aquarion. That's also on the table, Tom.
Mike, so no big climate bill, huh? They were pushing hard for that.
Apparently not. Yeah, we've seen overtures from activists on the desire to do something related to climate change. But like a lot of things that didn't quite get through this year's regular session, it looks like those measures will have to be shelved for some time in the future, maybe another special session later this year.
Mike, so what about some of the other folks who felt like they got the short end of the stick in this year's session? Any hope for some of their issues?
Yeah, not in this special session, it would seem. There were, of course, many groups who wanted more than what they ended up with in this year's session. One of the starkest examples of that is what happened to many Connecticut theater companies, or rather, what's happening to many Connecticut theater companies. These are nonprofit performing arts institutions. They were actually promised state-allocated federal dollars only to have it rescinded during the last days of the session. They've been making a ton of noise in the press, and many of you would happen them to be unfair, but it does look like they'll be made whole. It does not look like, rather, they'll be made whole in this special session. There's hope remains, though, that later this year, when another accounting of all those leftover relief dollars is done, that those theaters might get what they were promised in the first place. But, of course, even that still up in the air, Tom.
Mike Cerulli, Sumo's never swept any funds, huh? Thanks for joining us, the great Mike Cerulli. Next up on Capitol Report, the battle over bump stocks. We'll hear from Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy when we get back. Do not go away. Sweep, 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 baby, sweep. The battle continues in the U.S. Senate over bump stocks. So last week, Republicans blocked bipartisan legislation that would outlaw bump stocks after the Supreme Court struck down a ban on the rapid-fire gun accessory used in the 2017 concert shooting in Vegas. Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy headed to the floor to say the only purpose for bump stocks is mass slaughter and implored his Senate colleagues to take action. Watch this.
This is not a gotcha unanimous consent request. This is a real attempt to effectuate what we thought was a consensus, that people shouldn't have access to machine gun technology in this country. Senate Republicans could have agreed to work with us. They could make an offer today to expedite consideration of this bill next week.
Last week, Nebraska Senator Pete Ricketts, who is a Republican, blocked an immediate vote on a bill calling legislation gun-grabbing overreach that could be interpreted to include other gun accessories beyond these bump stocks. McKinney, what do you think?
Well, they should ban bump stocks. I would vote for it. We've done it here in Connecticut. What's disappointing, though, and everyone I think knows I like and respect Senator Murphy, is his attack on the Supreme Court, trying to delegitimize it for his decision, is really something that he should stop doing. Let's remember, this was a Donald Trump bump stock ban. The Trump judges, the conservatives, overruled him, and the liberals supported him. So we need to get back to legislating, not executive orders, not relying on the Supreme Court. The legislative branch needs to legislate, and I hope they will ban bump stocks.
When we were having the gun debate after Sandy Hook, Senator, and you were very key to that, how many days and hours did we spend going through it? It is nuanced, and the Supreme Court looked as though they've hinged on the language of what a bump stock is as opposed to pulling the trigger. Look, they don't belong in civilized world. I was in the military. I'm trained with the M16. I know how to fire it. I know how to take it apart, put it back together. This is a little go-around that puts a weapon that has machine gun capabilities in people's hands that don't deserve to have it. The only place it should be used in the military. I applaud Chris Murphy for fighting on this, and I find it very unusual, I guess, but these times are unusual, that 2017, the Republicans all voted for it. Trump put it into place, and now that we have a presidential election, somehow the rules are different. The Republicans don't want to pass it now, and Trump is saying don't do anything with it. Politics is hurting our safety as citizens.
Just quickly, though, what the Supreme Court looked at is the congressional law that defined machine gun, which was done before bump stocks even existed. They need to revise the law.
Liz, wrap it up here.
One of the big things, too, unfortunately, is anything can be turned into a bump stock, right? Like anything can turn a weapon into a far more deadly weapon. And I think what we really need to be looking at on top of this is enforcement.
Yes.
Right? Connecticut has some of the most restrictive gun laws in the country, and yet we are not enforcing our laws, right? We have 90% of our gun laws are going dismissed or nollied. We need to get dangerous weapons and anything that augments those weapons out of the hands of dangerous people. And anybody who's not aligned on that is not serious about gun control. So we need to be really honest about the fact that anything can turn any weapon into something far more dangerous, which makes it so difficult to effectively legislate those policies.
All right, guys, so where does Connecticut stand when it comes to the best and worst license plates in the nation? The answer when we get back. Don't go away. Well, at least we're not talking sports in the fourth one for you, huh? Well, if you've ever gone on a long road trip, perhaps you've had some conversations with your fellow passengers about which state has the best looking license plates. And, well, if you haven't, let's just thank the folks at Autoblog.com for ranking all 50 from first to worst. And if you're wondering where Connecticut falls on the list, well, we didn't make it to the top tier or the top half for that matter. Our plate ranks 31st. Autoblog gives props to our blue into white color scheme, the state map, and the Constitution plate on the state. As for the best plate, the winner is, well, I'm not sure about this, Colorado for its iconic Rocky Mountain design and green backdrop. It's also the most distinctive. As for the worst, California, bland, white, uninteresting font. Sorry, Golden State, you lose. What do you think, guys?
The Colorado plate just looks like a Coors Light can. I mean, there's nothing special about that.
Was it from Dumb and Dumber? Expected the Rocky Mountains to be a little rockier than this?
Yeah, so look, I have to apologize to the state of Connecticut because I voted to get rid of the old blue and white.
I like your blue and white
The
plate.
blue and white's really
That's
nice.
classic.
And I like the old California one, not the new California one. But if I'm going to pick a favorite, it's Hawaii. Why?
Hawaii's good.
Because it's Hawaii.
I'd want to see that on my car.
Exactly.
That's right.
Mine is Alabama.
Okay.
And the reality is, John and I don't look at plates when we're driving around together. We play punch buggy the whole time. And usually have the bruises to prove
That
it.
makes a lot of sense.
No punch backs, though, Joe.
I do miss the old Connecticut license plate, though. That was a good one.
Yeah,
Maybe we can bring him back.
Let's bring him back.
Maybe we can bring him back.
Okay.
It's McKinney's fault. He fessed up.
I blame him for a lot
All
of
right,
things.
let's go. Brandon, run
We'll add that
for
to the
office
list.
on bringing back the old
All right,
Old plates.
Ned's watching. He can get it done.
Could you
That'll
get
do
that
it
done?
for this week for my pal, Brandon McGee, the great Harrison Woods. Lizzie Mack. Johnny Mack, see you next week.
There we go.
It's in
Let's
today.
see.
We almost had a Jan Brady moment there. Oh!
Come on, one more.
Oh, you're
See you
done.
next week, guys.
That's out.
You guys are hilarious. A segment